Welcome to another East Trade Winds presentation with Doug Brown.
So here's the number one thing that I've found with consultants and coaches, and some of you I've actually met on the line. Some of you have built businesses, traditional businesses, and I think the number one challenge that I find with coaches and consultants is they think they're a coach or a consultant, and they don't realize the real business they're in, and that's preventing them from scaling. And so the real business that coaches or consultants are in is actually the sales business. It's the client acquisition business. And so we want to deliver our products and services, but we get stuck in thinking that that's the actual business. That's not, it's actually the delivery mechanism of what we actually do. So if you think about it as a painter, for example, if they painted houses, if they can't sell that job to go paint the houses, they would be sitting in their van or truck trying to figure out how am I going to paint some houses. So it's all about lead generation and about conversion. And what I would recommend for most people is to focus about 80% of their time on focused efforts on generating a lead and converting a lead. If you do this, your business will start to grow. How do you do this? I break it down and say, look, we need 6 different methodologies in order to create incoming leads into our business in some capacity. What we do here is we have a minimum of 6 different ways that we generate business. Okay, so we built up to over 7-figure business doing this. And so, you've got to kind of find the 6 ways that work for you. For example, we will do small hosted events. We'll get people together in a room. We'll do a breakfast. We'll do a virtual event or whatever, just like we're doing here. Right? And people are exchanging information. We're teaching something. We're invoking discussions. That's one of our ways that we do that. Speaking is another way, getting out in front of people and talking. Podcasting, I believe, Carl, you mentioned podcasting, and someone else on the line, I apologize. Naomi, I think, also mentioned podcasting. So podcasting is another way of doing that. I personally, even though we have our own podcast, I personally do 2 things. I go on other people's podcasts, and that gives me exposure to other people's audiences. But on my own podcast, I only now invite people who I want to be my ideal client. So we're very, very particular about who we bring on the podcast. I'm not looking for my podcast, for example, to be this world renowned podcast. The world that I want is, can they become my client? And if you bring those on that can become your client, then you can have that engagement conversation with them. So, how many of you on the line just have at least 6 or more ways of driving business in? So, a bunch of you. Um, and then the next question is, are they actually the things that you should be having? Right. So, this was the other thing we had to learn. We started 6 things and we were like, okay, yeah, we got all these 6 things going. And then when we started measuring them, we're like, 4 out of the 6 really are just a time waste for us. We're spending a lot of time doing this, doing that. My podcast, for example, was a complete time waste for me until I actually started shifting it over into going after ideal clients. So most people in a podcast are not making money off their podcast. They try to make money off their podcast, but they're not making money off their podcast. And that was the game we were trying to go. Let's get sponsorship. Let's get this. Let's get our ratings up. We were spending a lot of money out. We weren't bringing a lot of money in. The moment I started shifting it over to, hey, here's my ideal client, all of a sudden I'm picking up jobs from that particular podcast. So when you're looking at your 6 plus different ways, there's 2 things to look at. Number 1, are they actually giving you a return on your investment? Because we don't want to, we want to distinguish between activity and results in our lead generation component. So that's the first thing to look at. The second thing to look at too, and this one might kind of sound weird, but do you actually like doing it? Because a lot of you teach on this line, how to manifest your ideal life, right? But if we're constantly stuck in something we don't like, even though it is producing, trust me, you can find something that you like that actually will produce, that you'll want to do more of it. And that's where a lot of people kind of drop the ball on this thing. So it's all about generating a lead. We could call it get a lead, close a lead, and then you deliver. That's the coaching business. And the other thing that I find that people don't do in scaling is they don't extend through their own relationships. So most coaches and most consultants, believe it or not, are not asking for referrals. They're not extending the relationship through the relationship they already have. So somebody's super happy with what they do, but then they don't ask who else. So what ends up happening, because referrals are another methodology. It's another one of your 6 ways, if you will. So you can do 2 different things. You can extend through the current relationship to the new relationship, number 1. You can also increase transactional value through what you do. So none of us, I suspect, most of us are not a one trick. In other words, we could do other things in our business that could have more monetary value coming in from that same client, but we tend not to offer it. It's a very strange thing amongst coaches or consultants. Like if we had a restaurant, for example, we would say, "Hey, do you want this beverage? Would you like this dessert? Would you like to come to our next opening that we're doing here?" We'd invite people in. It's just a natural thing. But as a coach or a consultant, we don't do that. We don't offer them to even to buy our book, right? And we don't offer them to, I mean, anything that's small or large that you can increase the transactional value on, because it's not just about increasing the transactional value. It's big about creating a stickier client. The more services that somebody engage with you, then the stickier they are. For example, I could use Carl or Naomi's services and extend the relationship I have with my clients to somebody who's looking to do or be booked on a podcast. Now, I could probably make a relationship with Naomi or Carl on this line and ask, if I bring you a client, could I get a little piece of that? That's all. And so they may be agreeable, they may not be. I've never asked. But if they're agreeable, now I can extend the client through someone else's relationship, my relationship, bringing them forth and picking up a little bit of money. Now, this might sound a little weird, or you might think, well, just that's not really what I do. I'm a coach, I'm a consultant. But, we add 6 figures a year through relationships. We don't do the work. We just refer them to other businesses, and the other businesses usually pay us about between 10 and 20%. That's kind of the average going. So going back to, you are in the client acquisition business. If you want to grow a coaching practice to a $500,000 a year, you've got to, we have, must be in the client acquisition business. No business on the planet gets, unless it gets lucky, gets to a 500,000 to $1 million without a focus on client acquisition. And it must be consistent through the process. Now, here's a little trick that I've learned every single year. It's a little mind trick, but it does work. You want to raise your income by 10% a year. So every year you think about raising your income by 10% a year. And I'll tell you why this works. I had to figure it out because it definitely, when I first started in the the coaching business, I was a coach. And within 4 months, I was doing $65,000 a month in coaching sales, doing exactly what I'm telling you now. So this is not, theory. And every year I had to ask myself, how do I increase this by 10%? And here's the reason I did it, because I don't believe our governments, and not because I'm an anti-government person, but I don't believe that inflation is only 4 to 4.5% a year. I think all of us agree right now that inflation hasn't been 4 or 4.5% for the last couple of years. And back in 1987, I think this was, I started calculating it and I'm like, geez, inflation is probably more like 7 or 8%. And I'm like, so here I gotta make 10% more, or I keep losing my money every single year. Like, if you wanna create wealth generation, you gotta make more than the inflation's eating away. That was my thought process back there. And I said, "Well, what if I apply this to my business? If I'm a 500,000, I gotta be 550,000 next year, and if I wanna be, the following year, I gotta be in the 600s, and the following year, I gotta be, like, the high 600s." And here's what happens when you do this. If you focus on client acquisition and you're consistently trying to grow your business in this capacity, 10% a year, it forces us to figure out how to do it if we're committed to it. And once we are committed to doing it, what we end up doing is building skill sets that make us grow way faster than 10% a year. Because you start to develop these business growth skill sets and you're applying these business growth skill sets. And what will happen is, maybe in the first year, you'll make your 10%, or maybe it's 12% or whatever. And then the second year, you'll make that and it'll go a little higher. But by year 2, year 3, what I found is you get that hockey stick curve that people talk about in business, where it just goes like this. And so when I first started out, I was selling in that 65,000 a month. It's really hard to go from that mindset to, oh, I got to nail another 10% next year, because I didn't know where it was coming from. This is where that 6 ways came from. So I started realizing the more I could create incoming inbound leads and put them on an automated basis, the more I could focus on the conversion side of the business. And so what ends up happening is when you keep driving these numbers up and you keep expanding your mindset to go at 10% a year, your business will naturally grow to where you want it to go and probably go beyond that. Any questions?
So when you say focused on growing 10% a year, are you primarily focused on new clients? Are you primarily focused on growing your existing clients or
Ooh, great.
or some combination?
Yeah, it's a great question, Mitchell, because, the answer is both. You want to focus on both. Sorry, Mitchell, it's not an A or B coin flip. You want to focus on both. And here's the reason why. Your existing clients already know you. They trust you. The decision will be quicker, number one. They'll generally, if you've done a great job and they want something new, they'll generally pay you more money the next round. Okay, so for example, I had one client that started, they were doing $3.5 million a year. I work with business to business now, usually. They were doing 3.5 million a year. They grew to $6 million. And they were paying me $3,500 a month, if I remember correctly, for when I was coaching them through that process. When they got to 6 million, we took a little bit of a break. We stayed in touch. Oh, by the way, write that one down. You got to stay in touch with your people. Follow up is so critical in this thing. Right. And so 9 months later, literally, I called them, said, "Hey, I'm going to be in your area. I was traveling. You guys want to have lunch? I just want to see you again." And they said, "Sure." We sat down and they were talking to me about they wanted to grow. And I said, "You guys should develop a partner program." A partner program is just an independent agent program that goes out and sells their products and services. And it's the agent gets paid a percentage. They get the client. And they said to me, "Oh, cool, thanks." And we left and they called me the next day and they said, "We've been thinking about this partner program." And I said, "Oh, well, ask away. I'll answer any questions. I love you guys." I wasn't even thinking about trying to sell them anything at this moment. And they said to me, "Why don't you help me?" And I said in my head, I was going, "Oh, geez, dummy. You should have probably planted this seed before, right?" This is long before I knew what to do on a consistent basis. And so I said, "Sure, I'd be happy to help you." I said, "Well, what do you think that, you could, pay out? I mean, we're kind of friendly now. I just asked the question." They said, "How about $180,000 in your first year to help us?" And I said, "I can make that work." And so they paid me $180,000 to help them build that company. Now, here's the thing I want you to get out of the story. They grew from 6 million to 10 million, but now they started throwing me referrals because I was smart enough to start to ask. All right. So one client can become multiple clients and then lead you to other clients. You work easier. And by the way, when somebody refers you, the conversation's very different than if you don't know the other individual and they don't know you, because that trust that is being transferred, like if Wayne said, "Hey, you should talk to, Bernie," and I didn't know Bernie at that time, and I knew Wayne, I would immediately talk to Bernie, and Wayne's trust goes with me in that conversation to Bernie. So Bernie's already at that place where I, will trust him far more, right? But if you don't know somebody, to Mitchell's question, new clients, right? New clients, they don't know you, so you've got to be able to establish that credibility in that place, right? So you work on both,
So as
but you
I'm
get
listening to you, one of the things that's like hitting me is like if somebody had, let's say, a one meeting a month with you,
yes.
and let's say it's an hour, and a half an hour is devoted to here's my existing clients. How am I doing increasing revenue from those existing clients by 10%? And the other half hour was here's the number of clients I have. How do I increase that by 10% over the course of the next year? Then in essence, you're actually growing it by 20%. But what you're doing is you're focusing on that 10% and you're focusing both on increasing your number of clients and increasing the business from your existing clients.
And the quality of the client too,
And
Mitchell.
right.
That's the other one, right? So you're always wanting to increase the quality because you can get more money from that quality of client. So yes, I mean it's geometric growth when it comes down to it, Mitchell. And so, but it's really amazed me. Like I tell everybody, like I'm not that smart, but I'll outwork you. Right? But it amazed me when I first started looking at the numbers, and I've applied this to different businesses. I started a whole new business, in this space, and I was all on my own, and I didn't, and the business went to six figures the first year, and then the next year, if I remember the numbers correctly, please forgive me. I focused on 10%, but it went to 223,000, if I remember. And then the third year, it jumped from 223 to I think it was four or something like that. The following year, remember I said the hockey stick. So the following year, it jumped from 300,000 to 425, and then it jumped to 594. It jumped to the following year, right? So, like, that's kind of the thing, but it was always focusing on just what you were asking, Mitchell, and the things that I'm talking about. How do I get 10% more out of each and every one of these things? And, because you can extend a relationship through the relationship you have to another relationship, or you can extend your current relationship through in other ways of getting money. Like if you go to do a speech, for example, you could, in theory, you could just say to the person, "Hey, how would you like to do some pre-employee surveys, let's say, within a company, right?" And so that you get to know them, they get to know you. I'll be able to tailor the presentation better to your audience, et cetera, et cetera. They'll pay for you to do those pre-surveys. So instead of maybe getting whatever, a few $1,000 or $10,000 or whatever you would to get to speak, you're now, let's say for those pre-surveys, you get an extra $1,500. And then you could interview the executive leadership or whatever, and you can extend these things. How about I do a couple of sessions, after or whatever with the audience, right? You can add on these things to a talk and make a $5,000 talk into a $10,000 talk. And so when you're doing the same thing, you're with the same client, but what you're doing is you're growing exponentially everything that you're doing. And that's one of the things we as coaches and consultants don't look at it because we don't think we're client acquisition people. We think now in client acquisition, if you were a salesperson and you went out to sell something, you want to sell everything you could sell to that client for their benefit. You just don't wanna sell them stuff like they don't need it, right? If they have a boat, you don't wanna sell them tires, right? They're not they're not gonna use it. But anything that you could sell around the boat, you would want to, maybe fuel, maybe, polishing stuff for the boat. I'm making all this up, right? Maybe you wanna sell them an anchor. You wanna sell them an extra gas can because they go out on long voyages and they weren't thinking about that. All of these things you could sell that would increase your sale. That's what a client acquisition person does. Any other questions?
I would like to know if you make a distinction between your client acquisition and what level that they're capable of spending. Because I'm looking for clients on a higher level, a bigger price tag. Are we doing the same exact thing? You might be calling that a quality client, but I want to market or acquire a client that's gonna pay me more rather
Yeah.
than have a bunch of clients that are paying me less and I have to do more work.
Sure. That's an intelligent form of leverage, Sharon. And since we're from the same state, I'll give you extra special answers. No, the
Yeah.
here's what I found. So when I'm going to use a different example than a coach because it still applies. This is from my own personal life. So I was a professional DJ for many, 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 many years. And I played all throughout Boston and New England. When I first started doing DJ work, I started doing work for about 100 to $150. I would go to a wedding, I would go to a party, whatever. I started out part time, and I thought, man, this is awesome, right? Like I'm making $150 cash. It's like, um, and then I went to this place called the Marconi Club. It's in Stoneham, Massachusetts, and I was playing a wedding and they were paying me $175. And the bride and groom were complaining to the hall about they had plasticware on the dish for the champagne toast for the bride and groom. And I walked over to the function hall facility manager there at the Marconi Club and I said, geez, I'm curious, what did they pay for this room? And he said $75. And I was like, and they're complaining about having plastic dishware for a toast with 75. What did they think they were gonna get, crystal? I mean, what were they? He goes, "I don't know. It was $75," and he walked away. And I started thinking, why am I playing these places for $175? And then a friend of mine, Chris Wimmers, said to me, Doug, you're way underpriced as a DJ. Now, he was a DJ getting more money. And I said to him, he goes, double your price. You'll get better quality clients and you'll work half the time. And I said to him, I can't do that, Chris. I'm like 150, I'm $175, man, you know. And he's like, you are way too good for 175 bucks. Anyways, 200 jobs later, I decided I'm going to raise my prices. And so I did. And I went to like 250 and work kept coming. So I went up to 350. Work kept coming. I went up to 400. Work kept coming. 450, 650, 750, 850. Kept coming. I said, the heck with this. I'm going to raise my price to $1,400 for the DJ work. Kept coming. But Sharon, what kept coming at that point, Donald's Christmas party, Fisher Scientific. I was playing in country clubs that were spending $250 a plate for a wedding. I was playing at the top of the hub in Boston. I was playing like at Berklee College of Music. I was playing like all these events and all these high level weddings and, places were paying me. I was making as much money doing one third the jobs that I was doing before. But more importantly, the quality of the individual that was referring me was to another quality of individual. So what I learned from that, and I apply that into the coaching business, is you got to determine who will be able to pay you that kind of money. And then your marketing, your client acquisition efforts go into that client only. And the other clients that would have been at the Marconi Club, so to speak, you can take them if you want to, but I recommend you don't. You find other people who want them, pass them to that person, take a percentage, and you focus on the higher level client that can actually pay you the higher level money. If you
Now I
don't,
just
you'll
have
be
to
in a
find higher level clients.
What was that?
So I have to find higher level clients.
Find people who actually have the money, right? Like, I like on my website, if you go to CEO Sales Strategy, you'll see on my website it's a $7,500 diagnostic and it's $150 to $250,000 plus 15% of the EBITDA growth in a company for me to work with them.
Thank you.
Right? So I put it right on the website. So when people are coming in there, if they look at it and they go, I would never pay $150,000 or whatever, that's okay. I'm not gonna spend my time going after people who are gonna pay me $25,000 anymore. So that doesn't mean I'm better than anybody else. I have friends who charge $500,000 to $1,000,000, right? So it just depends on what you want. So you go after that level and you don't compromise.
Okay.
You still pay the bills though. So don't be at the place like, well, if I can't get these people, I won't take some of this work. You still got to pay the bills while you're transitioning through that process.
We thank you for watching. We meet every Tuesday between 8 and 9 a.m. Eastern. There is no cost and an option to become a speaker too. Find East Trade Wins on LinkedIn.